Hello, I'm Elliot Twig. I'm with Target Engineering Group. We're a consulting firm in the state of Florida where we do construction administration. I've been a member of APWA since 2006, and my current involvement right now is I'm the membership chair for the state of Florida, as well as the Central Florida branch chair for one of our 11 branches. I'm part of the leadership and management team, and we're doing the 7 habits of highly dysfunctional leaders. And my topic is number 5, which is passive-aggressive behavior. All right, so we're taking it back to basics. What is passive-aggressive behavior? If you look at the definition of passive-aggressive behavior, it would be avoiding direct confrontation. Just because confrontation is part of the definition, you might think of words like fight, conflict, argue. Those words tend to have a negative connotation, but it's not always a negative connotation for passive-aggressive behavior. The key word in that definition is direct. So what are some words for direct? It could be candid, straightforward, outspoken, open, just being direct and being out there. So when someone is avoiding the direct confrontation, they're actually just displaying that passive-aggressive behavior. Or in other words, they're just being indirect. So other words to describe indirect could be beating around the bush, being ambiguous, just not being straightforward, being sneaky maybe, or just sugarcoating some topic. So some signs for recognizing this passive-aggressive behavior could be the silent treatment. It could be just as simple as walking in the hall and saying hello to somebody, but that person just not respond. Or it could be sabotage. Maybe you have a major presentation that you have one day, and that one key person just didn't show up. And they did it deliberately. It was something that they intentionally just did not show up. They wanted to sabotage that presentation. Or it could be withholding praise. Maybe somebody's a little bit jealous of somebody that did something that was great, and they just didn't want to acknowledge that greatness that that other person did. So this passive-aggressive behavior, we see it in ourselves and we see it in other people. So what would be some reasons why somebody would display this passive-aggressive behavior? It could be just that fear of confrontation. They just don't want that face-to-face interaction. It could be somebody that's just hiding behind their email or hiding behind their desk, writing a text message, or just doing something where they're not directly facing somebody or talking to somebody. Could be not giving that direct feedback, or just not having, again, that face-to-face interaction. Other reasons could be you just don't want to rock the boat. Maybe that boss has something that they want you to do and you just don't agree with it. Or maybe you just don't agree with something that your boss has told you. And in your gut, you're saying, I don't agree with it. But you go with the flow because you're displaying that passive-aggressive behavior. It's easier to do that than to actually say no, or to be direct and say, I don't like that idea, or let's do something different. So how can you change? Well, the first thing would be assertive. Be confident in what you're doing and make decisions. And it could be a simple decision, just as simple as somebody asking you, where do you want to go to lunch? And you say, well, I don't really care. Where do you want to go? In your heart, you really want to have a decision. You really would like to go somewhere. So really the best thing is just be assertive and say where you want to go. And even if you really don't have an opinion, make a decision anyways, because then you're going to be assertive making that decision. You won't have that passive-aggressive behavior towards just the simple thing of going out to lunch. Another form of passive-aggressive behavior could be the silent treatment. And again, it could be that simple going in the hall, saying hello to somebody, and they just don't even respond. But the first thing you should do is probably think the best intention. Maybe they just didn't hear you. Or maybe they were so focused on something different that they didn't even acknowledge or know that you were there. But I did have an experience where it was intentional, and sometimes it can be intentional. We were doing staff meetings, and we had this group that were what you would consider the good old boys. I clearly don't fit the good old boy mold, So when I came into the room, I'd say hello. Sometimes there were all of them there. Sometimes it was just a couple or one. And I never was acknowledged by either of them. So I made it a point, after many times attempting to say hello and never getting a response back, saying, I'm just going to address them by their name. Because if I'm a little bit more direct in who I'm saying hello to, then they're more than likely going to say hello back. So that's what I did. I entered the room. I said, such and such, the name. They had to look at me because I called them by name. And then that's when I said, hello, how are you doing? How was your weekend? And even though the responses were short and didn't have any interest in conversing with me at all, I still was able to make that engagement and be a little bit more direct and say, I'm in the room as well, and I would like to say hello and at least be part of the group that we're here as a staff meeting, and you're my peer. So another way to change, I think the best way is just giving that direct feedback, creating that way where you can actually be in front of somebody and in person. That's where you can really make a lot of difference. If you're a supervisor, the key thing is to hold your team accountable. Hold that person accountable, and it's uncomfortable sometimes to have difficult conversations, but it's better than the alternative of avoiding the confrontation or avoiding that conversation altogether. Problem employees can be a really difficult thing to handle, especially for those supervisors or managers, and you may be one of those that just has a hard time with direct conversation or direct confrontation. So one of the things I would suggest is holding them accountable, but also bringing them in and talking to them. And even though that might be really hard for you to do, it will make such a huge difference. Giving them the direct feedback is really probably what they need or what they're looking for. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But if you are a supervisor or manager, it's your obligation to do that. Holding your team accountable is key. And doing that and doing that in a passive aggressive way is not going to make a successful team. So you really need to have that direct conversation with your team members, especially those that are problem employees. I've had several management experiences over the years and had many people that I've managed. A lot of them were great employees, and I did have some that were problem employees. One employee, I remember, I brought that person in, had a conversation with the things that we needed to make changes to or had that person change, and that person didn't even recognize or acknowledge or know that they were even doing the things that they were that I pointed out to them. So needless to say, they changed their ways and actually became a really great employee. But I've had others that were not so good, and I've had those direct conversations with some. And holding people accountable that don't want to be held accountable, that makes them nervous. Or it might make them say, this is not the environment I want to be anymore, and then they might change careers or might go to a different place. And in the end, that might be the best result for your organization. But the other part can be where if the person just really is adamant, does not want to make the change, you can just help them be successful in a different organization. In summary, confrontation may not be comfortable, and it may not be something that you are wanting to do, especially if you are constantly doing that passive-aggressive behavior. But it is necessary, especially if you're a manager or a supervisor. Embrace the confrontation. Don't avoid it. It doesn't have to be ugly. It doesn't have to be messy. Just embrace it. You want to figure out what you want, and then say what you want. Sometimes you just need to put yourself first. Be that assertive, confident, direct person that is probably somewhere inside you that you just need to have come out. So in closing, make a decision today. So in closing, I challenge you to one simple little thing that you can do today. Decide where you're going to lunch.